Hey, we're back for 2023. Welcome to the Rad Norty Show. Have you wondered what is happening inside a fighter's brain when they get knocked out? Do you ever ask yourself, what are the long-term consequences of all these combat sports we love to enjoy? Well, that's exactly what we're getting into tonight. What happens inside a fighter's brain when they get knocked out and the long-term consequences of head injuries related to all these combat sports? So go ahead, say hello in the chat, give us a thumbs up, let us know you're here. We're excited to have you back for the year. Leave your questions, comments. We're going to get to them all live. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. And we're live. All right, Josh, not a Dr. Norty. Welcome back for 2023. We took a couple weeks off. We were getting warmed up, kind of planning new content for the year. Well, the new year's here. How were your holidays? How was everything? You excited to be back on the show?
It was good, man. It was relaxing. It feels good to be back. New year, new intro, more show topics.
Oh, yeah.
Feels good. How are you doing?
I'm good. Holidays are crazy as always. Family was sick right before Christmas, and then we all sort of recovered and then scrambled to get Christmas plans together. But you know what? We had a good Christmas, a good New Year's, visited with family. Everyone's recovered. We're all back to work now. The Brandon Spine Group is doing what we do. We're rolling out new content for the year, and it's exciting. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to everything that we have ahead for the year.
Yeah, excited to talk about some knockouts today, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. You pose this topic for a show, and that's why I love the dynamic of kind of how we do this, right? Like, obviously, I've got all these years of education, and while I don't know everything, right, my role is to sort of dig into the research and help make it translatable. You come with the questions, right? Because I get so lost in it, I almost forget what the questions are. You just simply ask me, you're like, what is happening?
I'm a curious man. I'm a simple man with a bunch of curiosities. Yeah.
I literally just thought to myself, I was like, honestly, I don't know. I'm gonna have to go figure it out. So I spent some time looking into it. There's a lot of interesting. I mean, the short answer to it is nobody truly actually knows. There's some hypotheses out there. I think some that are more compelling than others for reasons we'll get into. But really, it is the idea of somebody getting knocked out and then that rapid recovery of consciousness in a fight is actually not something that is like very well understood. Obviously, it has a lot of consequences.
Yeah, and it's fascinating. I grew up loving boxing. I loved watching Mike Tyson and just like the beauty of the sport, right? But everybody wants to see a knockout. That's the show is all about. Yep. Everybody wants to see somebody get knocked out. And there's always a term like, oh, this person's got a strong jaw. Like, there's no way
or glass jaw.
Or glass jaw. It's no way that your jaw is just simply stronger than somebody else's. What happens when you get knocked out? Are people prone to getting knocked out easier than others? Like, when you start to really think about it, it's fascinating to me. And that's where this question comes from. Mm-hmm. And then after you get knocked out, we're going to get into all of this, I'm sure, but the punches leading up to the knockout. And I know I posed this question to you before is, if you're taking a ton of smaller punches and not getting knocked out, is that adding up over time, or is it better just get a clean knockout, get it over with, and end the fight? I'm very curious about this topic. If you can't tell, I'm excited. I'm curious, and I want to get into it.
It's interesting, right? You're basically asking, like, is it better to get, like, is it more dangerous to get knocked out in the first round, or not even ever get knocked out, but just take 10 rounds of punishment?
Yeah, 10, 12 rounds of just getting hit in the face, like, multiple times. Like, is that good for you? Or would it be better to just take one good shot, get knocked out, versus all these little punches over time?
I mean, I think part of the problem is there's no like, scenario to help, like, parse that out, right? I mean, what fighter,
right?
What fighter is like only ever getting knocked out once versus a fighter that never gets knocked out, and you compare and contrast, post-mortem autopsies
Yeah.
or something. That would be like how you ideally answer a question like that. But I mean, the short answer is we don't know.
Yeah.
We can sort of postulate about this or that or whatever. But the interesting thing, though, that I did to answer your one question, where you're like, oh, why do some people have glass jaws? So apparently, and this was, I think something I didn't necessarily. Oh, hang on, we're getting word from the producer. My audio sounds quite weird. Does it sound distant? How we doing? Does it sound?
It's very choppy and like almost sped up. It almost sounds like it almost sounds like you were recorded.
Right, let's see what we can do here.
Yeah, it almost sounds like you were recorded and somebody's listening to you at like 1.5 speed.
Really?
It's really weird. Yeah.
Oh, fascinating. Did it sound off?
It was fine. No, it was perfectly fine.
Perfectly fine, but it still just sounds off.
Yeah, it's like a little crackly.
Okay, well, this is what we're gonna do, chat. We're gonna go ahead and pass things off to El Capitan Norty here, and I'm gonna leave and come back in and see if that fixes our audio problem, because clearly something went wonky. Oh, all right, let's see.
It sounds better now. Oh, well, and it's just me. So
does it sound better?
Yeah, it's better now.
Check, audio check. We're better. We're good. Okay. All right. Yeah. There we go. Great. Hang on. Let's see. Yep. Okay. I'm getting everybody in my world is letting me know that the audio is bad, but I think we're good. Actually, on that note, where did my article go for tonight? Let me find it real quick. Did I leave it downstairs? I hope not. We may have. I think I may have left the article downstairs. I generally, as
the hard copies.
I'm a hard copy man, but I think we've left our hard copy downstairs. But that's okay. We live in a digital age. Let's go ahead and pull up some of the original. So maybe let's start with a non-technical article. This is an article. It was written in MedPage today by Dr. Robert Graham. I believe he's an internal medicine doctor and now retired. And the gist of this article was basically saying, telling his story about how he has this, grew up enjoying boxing and, pretty much the first time after getting knocked out the first time when he was in like high school, he pretty much like hung up the boxing gloves and said, I'm going to focus on my studies, and became a doctor. And now, he's in his retirement as a physician, knowing what he knows about the human body. He sort of writes this expose about culturally, why are we encouraging sports where the goal is to cause a traumatic brain injury, which is not why don't I just leave it at that? Let me get your thoughts on that. What do you think about a sport that where the goal is to institute a traumatic brain injury versus a sport like football, where that's not the goal of the sport, it's a byproduct, and obviously they're doing seemingly trying to eliminate that, albeit probably an impossible feat. But how do you think about that? Like,
somebody who grew up watching it and not knowing what we know even today about traumatic brain injuries, it's exciting to watch, and I think that's a thing, and it might be part of why maybe boxing is dying a little bit. It's like, we see the aftermath of some of the people we grew up loving to watch fight, and these people aren't aging well, in my opinion. And there's no other nice way to say it.
He talked about that in his article too. It kind of talks about Muhammad Ali and his basically like how pathetic the end of his career was, because he was already showing signs of Parkinson's before he even retired.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is when do they give it up, right? Like, I think you look at somebody like Mike Tyson, who everybody knows Mike Tyson is a knockout artist. What people don't realize about Mike Tyson is his footwork and his ability to not get hit and dodge punches was next level. And, because of that, he doesn't necessarily have some of those lingering effects that somebody like Evander Holyfield does. Evander Holyfield's whole process was, I'm going to go in and I'm going to take more punches than you. And I'm going to beat you, and you can hit me as much as you want. You're not going to take me down. And when you listen to Evander Holyfield speak now, his speech is still there, but as he goes on, I listened to an interview with
Can we
him.
pull up a clip? I don't follow
So
boxing or boxers.
I-
Do we have can we get like a clip
I-
of this guy talking? I want to see this.
I wish he talks normal and he's very with it, but the longer the conversation goes on, you can tell it's
Oh,
taking
I
him
see.
longer to process things. And that's my opinion. I'm like, well, he's still with it, but his speech is slowing as the conversation continues. And I have a hard time not believing that that's a lingering effect of the way that he approached his boxing career. And another person who is still very much with it, but his speech is very much slowed, is Hitman Tommy Hearns.
Hitman Tommy Hearns.
Tommy Hearns, man. Him and Sugar Ray. I forget which Sugar Ray. They're good buddies now. They used to be enemies. They're on podcast, and Tommy Hearns' speech is slowed. I don't know what he talked before his career, but certainly this feels like an impact of getting hit in the head a lot.
Yeah.
And it just makes you wonder what's at risk for something that's an entertainment sport, which is that was your question in the first place.
I would like to, ask these people, like, for everything, because the thing is, right, people will say, they know that what they're signing up for is, it comes at a cost, right? It's not all gain and no.
They're putting their bodies on the line.
Yeah.
To
the point where even some boxers have died in the process. I mean, that was another part of this guy's article written by, what was his name? I think
Robert something.
Robert Graham.
Dr. Robert Graham, correct?
He kind of gives these, here, we can put the article in the link in the chat for everyone.
Yeah.
If people want to follow along. This is the article we're referencing. It's an interesting expose written on, gives a couple anecdotes of some various fighters. Obviously they didn't just suffer traumatic brain injury. They suffered, they actually died. They had actual massive intracranial hemorrhage, which is apparently occurs in something like, I don't know what they quoted, some statistic. I want to say 6 a year, which seems like a really high number, actually.
That would be what I would call an alarmingly high number. Like, it seems like a lot of people for something that's supposed to be, again, a sport for our entertainment. That seems a little drastic.
Let me see if I can find this here. Roughly 6 deaths per year in boxing. That is a lot, actually.
Yeah.
Those are deaths. Those are not like hospitalized injuries.
Right.
That's a lot.
That seems high.
I mean, it doesn't seem high. I think that is high. That's 6 people. Well, I don't know. Maybe not. How many people die in like NASCAR a year? Let's see.
I don't think that many people die in NASCAR a year. You might have to check all racing.
All right, let's see. Like, deaths per year in professional racing. I feel like that could be like a sneaky deadly sport.
Could be that. That could be like 12.
How many people?
There's so many different forms of racing as well. Yeah. That might be tough because you've got all the different circuits, like trucks, whatever. Then you got bikes. Yeah. F1.
All right, wait, Carlos, if you find a number on that one, let us know. Yeah. But I am kind of curious because there's this idea of like, yes, they're putting their bodies on the line. They're signing up for this. They know what they're getting into. But I think in the world of boxing, that's where the argument made by some physicians is like, do boxers or athletes even, do they really fully grasp what they
could happen?
The potential gravity of the decisions they're making. I don't know if there's a good answer to that question. I mean, yes, they're adults, but on the other hand, right, people start these sports when they're children.
Right.
Like, it becomes ingrained in their culture.
Yeah.
They become raised to,
you almost have to.
Aspirations are set long before they're asked to really seriously contemplate the potential harm.
Or where they could really start to process and understand like what's at risk as they get older, as they develop.
That is true. That is true.
Life. Like, you're not going to understand that when you're 10.
I mean, you're not going to understand that when you're 16, 17, 18. I mean, these are ages where,
and that's where it becomes
considering
that's where it becomes real, right? That's
Yeah.
where, they've dedicated their life to it to this point. Do they want to keep doing that to
Yeah.
become, the best or a professional, or do they want to call it quits now? Well,
Exactly.
they're
I
still
mean,
ahead.
these are the age, just because the professional athletes are 22, 23, 24, 25, right? They're up there in that, they're mature, they're able to make their own decisions. They didn't make that decision at that age. They made that decision 10 years prior, and
Right.
having made that decision and commitment 10 years prior has led them to be in the position that they are as a professional athlete. So
And
I
you
think
could
there's
even,
definitely some ethical
yeah,
considerations. I don't know how
even at
far
that
you
point,
take that.
if they've dedicated that much of their life to their craft, and they're a professional at 22, made the decision when they were younger, and they've got all that money on the table. Are you going to walk away from that just because a little risk of some head injury? That's another thing to think about in all of this.
Yeah.
I don't think many people hang it up once they've been drafted by an NFL team. There's been a few that I could think of.
Yeah.
There's not many.
Well, I mean, you also, right, what you're doing is you're asking, and this comes down to the thing we've talked about many times about, like, anytime you're talking about head injuries, right? The very part of you that is needed to weigh the pros and cons of the decision you make and make a good decision, that organ of your body, your brain, is the very thing that's injured. Right. So you're injuring the part of your body that is supposed to perform higher level processing to make a non-emotional decision, but make a calculated decision. I mean, that's kind of unfair.
Yeah.
So you beat these guys in the head, you hang a professional career in front of them, and then ask them to make a calculated decision as to whether or not they want to accept the risks of participating in the sport. I don't know. It's a recipe for disaster. Obviously, it's led to multiple deaths per year, but I don't know what the solution is. Like, how do you fix something like that? Or where do you go with that? What do you do with that information?
That's so tough to say, because even a sport like boxing, like, I'm pretty sure up until you're a professional fighter, you have to wear headgear, which is that better or worse? You've got these big padded gloves that are absorbing
I don't know
a lot of that.
To be honest.
A lot of that impact already, and then you've got headgear, but how much of that is training them to take shots? So I don't have a good solution. I don't know if it'll ever change, because people love boxing.
I don't think it will.
People love watching boxing. It's got to be $1 billion industry, I assume. Like, there's at least hundreds of millions of dollars at play every few months, or whenever huge boxing matches are. Like, that's not going away anytime soon.
Yeah, combat sports, I mean, people love them too much.
Yeah,
and I don't know. Then again, I mean, people used to love watching people like get ripped from limb to limb by like a lion in the Colosseum of like ancient Rome, and somehow as societies evolved away from that.
We're gonna revert right back to that in a few years. Don't you worry.
That's true. I mean, maybe the lesson here is we just bring back the ancient Colosseum. And then, just take all these people in society and be like, well, if you can't kill a lion, we're just going to move on, in society without you.
It's the way of the world.
Yeah. If you can't battle a lion or help breed individuals that can battle lions, we're just going to create a society that you don't thrive in.
Yeah. Yeah. You're not okay,
let's see. Carlos says, approximately each year, 13 boxers die on average in the ring. That seems like a higher number than was quoted in the article I read. What's that?
2019?
The article I found was written in 2019. Carlos's found an article from CNN also in 2019.
Interesting.
All right, so we're somewhere between 6 and 13 people dying a year in boxing. I mean,
both are higher than I would have expected.
Yeah,
much higher. I would have guessed like 1 to 2.
I mean, just look what happened. Look what happened recently in the NFL with
Hamilton. Hamilton.
Yeah. What's his first name?
Damar Hamilton.
I knew it was like DA something. Yeah, the Bills player.
Yeah, Damar Hamlin. Sorry,
Hamlin. There you go. I mean,
I knew I was saying something.
I'm not a Bills fan, so I don't really know who. But I mean, look at all the buzz over that. And that was a guy who got hit in the chest and went into cardiac arrest.
And I want to.
That was one.
Yeah.
Imagine if the NFL had somewhere between 6 and 13 players dropping dead every year.
Yeah.
I mean,
and that leads
that's
me.
An absurd number when you really think. Like, how is the boxing commission covering this up?
The boxing commission's weird. Like, that might be the next most corrupt, like, athletic commission outside of FIFA, to be honest with you, in my opinion. That's not factual information.
Hold on. Back up the
Not
train.
a doctor.
Is that what we're talking about here? Corruption in sports commissions?
Listen, you cannot convince me that the boxing commission, like in the athletic commission that governs the boxing body, is not corrupt. Like, they just are.
I'm not gonna
There's no way it's not happening.
I'd have no basis to even try to, so why would I? Plus, I'm always a fan of a conspiracy theory.
Oh, I love a good conspiracy theory.
Let's talk about Pizzagate, my friend.
Oh,
I will talk about conspiracy theories. I will change this entire stream to talk about conspiracy theories.
I will switch this.
Good conspiracy theories.
I will take it up to one notch. We can change this entire stream going forward to the fact that birds are not real and there's surveillance cameras that are watching us.
Now, birds aren't real.
That's what I'm saying.
Definitely surveillance cameras.
You
heard it from a doctor.
They are not real.
Hold on. Let's get to some of the chats and the comment. Your digital media guy. What does he say? It was a form of Roman capital punishment where they condemned a person who's killed by wild animals. Usually lions are the good old days. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying, right? Society's gotten too soft, my friends. We need to start duking it out.
That's what I'm saying.
And we also got welcome to the show, Doug. Appreciate you being with us. Thanks for joining us. Glad you enjoy the show. We love you. Thanks for the thumbs up and the vote.
Appreciate you. Appreciate you stopping by today.
Back for 2023. For anybody who's just coming in, let's get you caught up. We're talking about basically what happens in the brain when a fighter gets knocked out. But we haven't even really actually made it to that. All we've been talking about is the absurd number of deaths that occur annually in boxing. And now we're about to get off on a tangent about how corrupt the athletic commissions are around boxing and I guess also FIFA. But before we do that, I'm going to take a quick pause. You know why? Because, well, yes, we get crazy and rowdy here on the Rad Norty Show. We are supporters of Brain and Spine Group, which is a nonprofit organization. Right now, we are currently running a fundraiser in order to support programs targeting the supporting brain and spine health for veterans and military members, as well as non-military members. But Brain and Spine Group distinctly has military veteran support programs, and then the other support programs are for everyone who's not military. So we are fundraising to support all of these programs. Obviously, we're very committed to helping support and provide resources to veterans and military with brain and spine injuries. So right now, up until February 15th, our goal is to raise $15,000 so that we can get these programs going. It's cost us about $40,000 annually to run these programs. We need to hit our $15,000 mark by February 15th in order to stay on track for the year. So if you scan that QR code down at the bottom of the screen, flip my finger, that right over there, or you can text BSG to 44321. You can donate to our fundraiser. So don't wait. Get in there. Don't wait till February 15th. Help us reach this goal so that we can help provide support and community services for military veterans as well as other patients with brain and spine injury. So with that, let's get back into the corrupt federations of organized sports. What hold on. You got to explain FIFA because I was not planning. That came out of left field.
Listen, I don't know the specifics. You just always have known. FIFA is for sure just taking money. Like they are taking money from any organization to like just let them do whatever they want. Right. And they just skim money off the top of everything. I'm pretty sure there's a documentary on Netflix. I should probably watch it. At the end of the day,
elaborate on that remotely.
No idea. Nope. I just know they take money from everything. And they're rigged. Games are probably rigged. What?
You think the games are rigged?
Yeah, 100%.
The World Cup is rigged? Is this what Norty is saying live to the
I
world?
was
That the
I was
World
saying
Cup is
that
rigged?
I was saying that with I forget Germany lost to somebody. I want to say it was Japan or Korea. They lost to somebody that they should not have lost to, and it happened on the second day. You want to know why? Because if something like that happened on the first day, people would know it was rigged. But because it happened on the second day, people are like, man, maybe it's not rigged. It
All
was
right.
rigged.
Hold on. Let's think. There was a World Cup
Rigged.
in 2022. And it's every 4 years, right?
It's every 4 years. I think they something.
So
No,
the
it was just the US. Yeah.
So the
Previous one was 2018.
Previous World Cup was 2018, right?
Yeah.
Donald Trump was president.
Checks out.
There's no way the U.S. does not win the World Cup if it's rigged and Donald Trump is president.
They didn't make it miraculously in 2018.
I don't believe it. Donald
Think
Trump
about
would
it.
be the first person to bribe
Think about
FIFA.
Think
I
about
believe
it.
that.
Think about
Donald
it.
Trump would be in there making deals with FIFA all
It's
day
all.
to make sure America is number one.
You think Lionel Messi doesn't win a World Cup with Argentina until 2022, unless it's just his turn at that point? Greatest soccer player of all time. It's a little weird. That's all I'm saying.
I don't know.
FIFA's rigged.
FIFA. Okay, you heard it here first from not a Dr. Norty. FIFA is rigged. They take money from everyone.
And everything. With little to no evidence or facts or any supporting argument, it is rigged for sure.
Okay, but what about professional wrestling? I mean, come on.
That's not rigged. That's real. That's a real competition of supreme athletes and superstars.
I think you're biased. You
100%. I am 100% biased with everything.
So according to the doctrine of Norty, FIFA is rigged.
Yep.
Professional wrestling is 100% real.
Accurate. And birds are not real.
And the sky is purple.
They could be.
All right. So
back on topic.
I mean, I don't even know what the topic is. 13 people a year are possibly dying in boxing. That's crazy.
That's wild.
That. Imagine if 13 NFL players died a season.
The NFL wouldn't exist.
Would it? That's crazy.
I don't think it would exist I'll take it something farther. If 5 people die a year, the NFL is not what it is today. Like, look at
one person died a year. One person had a cardiac arrest, and the NFL is like almost shut down for like a week.
Yeah, as they should, right? Like, that's something that needs to be addressed. Like, you can't have that happening in a sport that is for people's entertainment, in my opinion.
All right, what do we got here? Carlos is
Carlos trying to derail us.
Carlos is feeding into the FIFA corruption scandal. Yeah. All right, let's see. What do we got? Hang on, let me pull it up.
They took. Well, I think even Barcelona had to cut Messi because they couldn't actually pay his salary, yet they were paying him to be on the team. Like, how does that work?
What?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that was the case with Messi. That's why he's on PSG now.
No, I don't follow soccer. Football? Which
soccer.
Football are we talking about here? All right, let's see. According to Carlos's sources,
bribery, corruption scandal.
FIFA corruption scandal. Okay. The governing body, more than 24 FIFA officials and their associates implicated in a 24-year self-enrichment scheme. What the hell is a self-enrichment scheme?
Taking money from everybody for everything. Self-enrichment. I don't know.
For the record, Brain and Spine Group is not a self-enrichment scheme. Josh's career is a self-enrichment scheme.
That's
we
true.
can talk about that.
And I am not a doctor, but I know things. I know things about FIFA and their corruption and corrupted ways.
Awarding central to the scandal were accusations of bribery.
Yeah, it goes deep too. It's like very high level people at FIFA.
Hosting rights for the 2018 World Cup to Russia. So FIFA is funding the war in Ukraine. That's what I take away from this.
Probably.
Interesting. Okay, what else we got here? And let's bring this in. U.S. says FIFA officials were bribed to award World Cups to Russia and Qatar. I think it's pronounced
Which is
Qatar.
where? Is it?
I think so, because I used to think the same thing. I could be wrong.
Yeah. I mean,
Let's look it up. Pronounce.
It's getting derailed quick.
All right. I'm all about getting derailed. Yeah. Qatar.
Yeah, Qatar.
Hold on. Let's bring this in.
Qatar. Qatar.
Qatar. Qatar.
Qatar. It's tar.
Isn't that? We're basically saying the same thing.
I mean, I think we are saying the same thing.
We're just saying. I think we're enunciating it differently. Let's see. Qatar. Qatar.
See? Qatar. Qatar. Like guitar, but ka.
Yeah, it's like a guitar, but it's a Qatar. Yeah. Even though people from Qatar would probably.
We're probably offending somebody.
This is the American pronunciation. Oh, how do the British people say it?
Qatar.
Qatar. I'm gonna go play some footy in Qatar. All right. Let's see. For nearly a decade, Russia and Qatar have been suspected of buying votes to win hosting rights for 2018-2022.
Buying votes for hosting rights, buying votes for wins, tomato.
I mean, I guess I don't necessarily have a problem with buying rights for hosting.
Yeah, but where does it end, Ryan? Where does it end?
I mean, if that's where it ends, sure. But
that's not where it ends.
Problem. Interesting. Prosecutors made the accusations in an indictment charging 3 media executives and sports marketing company with a number of crimes, including wire fraud and money laundering. Okay. What about this, though? This is an international thing.
Yep.
How do you sue someone internationally? How does one country sue another country? I mean, I'm not a political science major by any stretch of the imagination, but it kind of seems like once you get outside, national politics, it's like a complete heyday.
I don't know. Isn't there some type of there's got to be some type of financial governing body for that type of thing?
I don't know. I mean,
do they work together? Maybe there's not. I'm not educated.
The UN, I guess, is your closest thing to global world order. That's a whole nother can of worms.
Yeah. See, there's
if you got a problem with another country, you just got to declare war and just put boots on the ground, my friend.
That's true. See, that's what our digital media guy, Carlos. There's a Netflix documentary.
There's a Netflix documentary. I didn't know this.
And if you are into corruption scandals, there's also a Netflix documentary about the ref that was rigging NBA games. Everything's rigged. Nothing's real. We live in the Matrix. Games? Yeah. Well, I want to say Billy Donovan. I'm pretty sure that was the coach of Florida, and that is not his name. But there was a ref that was rigging NBA games. Good documentary.
Hold on. Whoop. Hang on. We got a trailer. Let's watch it.
Oh, geez.
Why is that? No,
that's the New York Times.
Why is that not coming up? Oh, maybe it's. There we go. All right, here we go. I think we have oh, hang on one second. We gotta probably have to change the screen share so we got video audio. Uno minuto.
In a world.
Move source. We need to screen share. Share system audio.
Let's get it.
There we go. All right, so we're gonna have to mute ourselves. All right.
Sepp Blatter was the godfather of football.
Being a member of FIFA is like being in the secret garden. There's an unspoken code. You can do whatever you want.
They wanted to be a force for good.
The lines between right and wrong blurred.
Wire fraud, money laundering,
racketeering,
tax evasion.
FIFA became a criminal organization.
Mr. Blatter!
You're looking at 75 years in jail.
You are innocent until declared guilty.
If I will feel a tsunami coming, trust me, you haven't seen it yet.
Qatar! This is the World Cup of fraud.
Our business is our business.
Greed and politicking and backstabbing.
FIFA is under fire.
It's the biggest sports corruption scandal we've ever had.
The impacts go to every corner of the planet.
No comment, no comment. No comment.
Can I ask you how? Do these people really care about the game?
There were people I knew quite well that had just been arrested.
Where is my security?
If one of us is corrupt, we all are.
Let's go FIFA! Let's go FIFA!
Now you have created a monster.
Interesting.
Where does it end?
I mean, but here's the thing. They say the impacts affect every corner of the world. What does that even mean? Because I'm struggling to figure out why I even care. If FIFA wants to make a ton of money, people.
You care because you love a good conspiracy or a good scandal. I don't know. One of the two.
Conspiracy doesn't hook me. You want to talk about Epstein's Island? I'm all about that. Whatever.
That was more scandal than conspiracy.
I would hesitate to even call that a conspiracy theory.
It 100% happened. Yeah.
I mean that's. I mean the conspiracy theory is the government's cover up of it, and we're already about to get our entire live stream canceled. The CIA 100%. Is getting ready to shut us down. I'm sure because we're even mentioning that the government is.
If someone comes through that door, like we
isn't
know
that your closet?
100%. Yeah.
So. The CIA's got like a back door in your closet.
They're coming through the roof, through the closet.
It's some Monsters Inc. business.
They've got it mapped out.
All right. Well, we have sufficiently managed to not talk about any science related to actually getting knocked out, but maybe that's what we should do. Well, should we get back on track a little bit and actually talk about what we came here to talk about?
Let's get it back on track. The last thing we were talking about were deaths in the boxing ring. Somewhere between 6 and 13 people. It's a lot. And we talked about some of the aftermath of boxing careers of people getting hit in the head. Let's compare that. And this is something I posed to you before. Let's compare that to something like UFC or mixed martial arts, right? Like I don't see those same effects in retired MMA fighters. Is that because the sport's too new?
I think it's too new.
Or is it because
I don't think it's been around long enough?
Or is it because maybe a more violent blow or a clean knockout is better than repeated smaller blows to the head? I don't think there's enough longitudinal data on UFC fighters. I mean, when did UFC start? I'm going to throw out a random number and say 1996. 96? People really watched this in 96? UFC 1 start. UFC 1. 1993, according to Wikipedia. Yeah, but the other thing too is you have to think about like the history of the UFC and what it was when it started versus what it is now. Yeah. Wildly different. The whole point of UFC starting was the Gracie family wanting to prove to the world that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was the most superior form of martial arts. Pretty much. There were no weight divisions. It was just the Gracies throwing around massive dudes. So it wasn't really a weight thing. It was about comparing one martial art to another to see which one was superior. Yep. So it was about like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu versus Judo versus sumo wrestling. Versus wrestling versus correct. Yep. So how you have to factor in how long did it take to evolve into what it is today where you have these mixed martial arts specialists? Yeah. I bet very few people were getting knocked out in the original UFCs. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe that's a complete wrong assumption, but I would assume so too. I would assume more people getting choked out than knocked out. And I mean, is that, I guess let's take this to the next point is from your understanding, even if we don't know what causes a knockout, what happens to your brain when you get knocked out? What happens to your brain when you lose enough oxygen to pass out?
So there's a couple questions there.
Yep.
Passing out or is essentially like choking someone out when you cut off blood flow to the brain. That's basically like just inducing like syncope. Like somebody passes out, basically like, they faint. You just watch some like, I don't know, old movie from the 70s or 60s, right? And some woman gets surprised, like, oh, she like faints, right? Like the idea is, something has caused them to syncopize, which is basically where you get a temporary drop in blood pressure. Blood kind of doesn't pump to the brain, and the brain just kind of like quickly, blacks out. That's all choking someone out is, except instead of them being like a vascular tone issue, which is basically syncopizing, you're just mechanically cutting off blood flow through the carotid arteries. And so that's why it's like it shuts off and then blood flow resumes, presuming you let go of them, and they tend to wake up. That is different than a knockout. A knockout is not well understood, but one of the reasons is the differences are why vascular, like blood flow problems, are why they generally, it seems like the hypotheses surrounding like explanations being blood flow related are very unlikely.
Because you can't hit somebody so hard that it stops blood flow, I would assume.
Yeah, basically. Also, the time frame in which it happens is very different, right? Like losing blood flow to your brain, while syncope seems very fast, it's a slow process compared to like a literal knockout.
Right.
Right. A knockout happens lightning fast.
Yeah.
Even someone syncopizes, right? They don't just like stand up and like pass out. It's like a slow process of a couple seconds where they feel a little lightheaded, a little dizzy, and then they sort of fade away, and then they're out. That's sort of what happens when you choke someone out. It's like sort of like the tunnel narrows, and then all of a sudden it's just like, and then you're out, right? That's what happens when you like quickly cut off blood supply to the brain. Knockouts are like happening so insanely fast, right? You go from like somebody who's like upright, they're alert, they're moving around, they're doing things, and then all of a sudden it's just like
you'll see guys that the lights go off before they hit the ground. You know, you see them tighten up and they're dropping as they're unconscious, which also seems like that's another impact that could essentially not be good for your brain. Hitting the ground.
Sure. I mean, that kind of stuff though happens all the time.
Right.
I mean, it's actually kind of interesting. I mean, some people, it depends, right? I would imagine with like these like athletic floors, they're a little springy. They're not super hard.
They're not very soft. They're like I'm pretty sure there's like wood underneath.
No, I've been in a boxing ring. It's not like a wrestling.
It's not
soft, but it's
not like
it's got
stiff enough.
It's got a little compliance to it, as opposed to like you take some like old lady falls out of her hospital bed and like smacks her head on like a granite floor. Like that could cause those can cause like pretty bad head injuries.
Right.
But
it's not bad.
I mean, a boxer.
I still don't.
I mean, it's not gonna. I mean, it's certainly not gonna help his head injury.
I was gonna say I just don't think it's a good thing.
Well, no, but obviously we're not talking about anything good here. We're talking about varying degrees of bad.
That's true.
When you just got knocked out, I think that falling to the ground and hitting your head in that sort of semi-athletic compliant surface isn't quite as bad as what just happened.
And let's even say they don't get knocked out. I know we're getting sidetracked and this just made me think of something else. What about when they even get one of those big, like what are they, hematomas on their head? That can't be good.
Like it outside
like
the skull?
Huge, like it's like swells up where it's like.
Yeah. I mean, it's probably more of an omen to a more serious underlying injury, but the actual hematoma itself isn't. I mean, other than it just looks
terrible.
Yeah, it's not bad.
Okay, even if that's not bad, whatever's happening from what caused it can't be good.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like that part is probably not good. So it's more of probably a sign that something really bad may have happened, but it's not actually the hematoma itself is not
Those gross me out.
I mean, I've seen some pretty wild traumas where like people come in with just gnarly hematomas and all kinds of stuff. They like got thrown out of a car at like 80 miles an hour. I mean, there was like a teenage patient that was driving in like the back, or it was like a passenger in the back of a minivan going down the Garden State Parkway in New Jersey, and they had to like swerve to avoid hitting another car.
Yeah.
And the sliding van door like flew open and like threw this kid like out of the side of a minivan at like 80 miles an hour. I mean, like just absolutely shredded their skull. I mean, you want to talk about hematomas. There's hematomas everywhere. Yeah. Like, so when you see stuff like that, you see like these fighters hematomas and you're like, meh, not that bad.
All right. Fair enough.
Yeah.
But to me, those are one of the few injuries that like gross me out. I don't know why the hematomas like that.
Yeah. I remember
just looking at them. They just look crazy.
Yeah. Well, it's also one of those things that when you talk about getting grossed out by injuries, like desensitization is like a very real thing. Like I remember like watching these like crazy like medical mystery documentaries when I was in like high school. There was this guy I remember tripped and fell while frog hunting, and he's like frog hunting. Like if you ever seen like I don't even know how to describe it. We need a picture. Frog hunting. I don't know, spear. I don't even know what they call it. Yeah, one of these things. Let's throw that up on the screen.
I didn't know frog hunting was a thing. I feel like that's another thing we should maybe unpack at another
down
time.
In the bayou, they do all kinds of stuff.
It's a fork.
Like one of these things. Like
it's a fork. That's all it is.
But it's like on like a long stick.
Okay,
like,
there we go.
There you go.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a little aggressive. Like something like this, right?
Okay.
Like, so the guy was like walking with it, like with the fork up, trips, and it goes like through his chin.
Yeah.
And it was like in his face. Like it seemed like he was fine. It didn't like spear his brain or anything crazy. I remember seeing this in high school and basically like I got lightheaded.
See
like,
that?
I got up to like go to the bathroom because I was like, I have to like get out of this room, and like almost passed out. I had to like sit down on the floor and like collect myself. Now it's like and I remember thinking like at a young age, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to be able to be a doctor. I can't even like not pass out when I see this stuff. And I remember like I would literally like watch YouTube videos and like try to desensitize myself because it's like I want to be a doctor.
That
stuff pass out when I see gruesome stuff. And then
that stuff hasn't gotten to me much. Like, but for whatever reason, I know what this one's gonna be. I remember this fight. Yeah. That stuff's never gotten to me, but for some reason, like broken limbs and just certain injuries always gross.
Oh, don't get me wrong. Like you've seen the like classic kickboxing video that goes around social media where the guy like throws up like a high kick and then his leg comes down and just like folds in half.
Yeah, that happened to Conor McGregor, Anderson Silva. Those two both like snapped their legs. Like I think Conor's was more of his ankle level, but I'm pretty sure Anderson Silva like snapped his. What's the shin bone? He like snapped that like in half.
I don't know.
It was gross. Yeah, tibia.
Fibula.
Fibula's higher.
Probably is tibia. Yeah. No. You're thinking of the femur. Femur's higher.
Femur. That's what
fibula and tibia lie kind of next to each other in the lower leg. Mm-hmm. But I would imagine if somebody's leg. Oh, I just smacked my microphone. Was that loud?
No, it wasn't too bad.
Oh, okay. If you snap like a tibia, that would probably make someone's leg kind of jello over. Should we watch this video Carlos sent us?
I don't trust whatever Carlos just sent us, but
get the latest news. Let's see here.
If it's a gross injury, I don't want it.
What's that?
If it's a gross injury, I don't want it. I don't want any part of it.
Well, stand by. Let's see.
Oh, this is Joanna. I remember this. This is just her hematoma. It's gross.
Is it? Like, is it
it's
worth
not,
watching or?
It's not. It's like her whole forehead. Yeah. It's crazy. Watch when she look at that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I just thought she had terribly horrible face.
That is not what she looks like. She lost the fight, in case anyone was wondering.
Why can't I like scroll through this stupid video? This is so annoying. I mean, it's terrible resolution. You can't really appreciate the hematoma. Yeah. Who is it?
Joanna.
Unrecognizable with a massive. Yeah. Okay, let's see. Let's just put in. Hold on. Let's take this off. Hematoma. See if there's a picture.
I guarantee you there is. That one's one of the more known ones.
Let's see.
Yeah, like look at what she looks like all the way in the top left. That's what she normally looks like.
This is what she normally looks like.
To that. It altered the shape of her head.
I mean, yeah. I would
how do you fix
hematoma? I'll do that to you.
How do you fix something like that? Do you drain it? Do you cut it out?
Very unlikely. I mean, other parts, so like other parts of the body, you can get like these big hematomas that will cause like pressure buildup, like within an isolated compartment, and so you need to drain them to prevent development of what they call compartment syndrome. I mean, that's probably a horrible explanation because I've never, ever treated or diagnosed compartment syndrome because it just does not fall in the realm of anything I ever cover. It's like basically like, yeah, I learned about it in like med school. So my explanation of that could be horrible. In general, I suppose technically you probably could, but I have personally never seen like a compartment syndrome-esque type thing from like an extracranial hematoma like that. Generally, there's just like enough space where these things will expand and just kind of leave them.
It just goes away?
Yeah, or over a very long period of time. I mean, although I suppose if it was like really, really bad, yeah, you could possibly go in and have to drain it. But I mean, that might even be something like a plastic surgeon or ENT does. Maybe that's why like I had never like really experienced it, because if it ever needed to be done, they may not have called neurosurgery for something like that. Then again, I'd be very surprised because I feel like everyone calls neurosurgery for everything, no matter whether it's a neurosurgery problem or not. They're like, oh, this patient's got like a stubbed toe. Can you come make sure they don't have like a giant subdural? Like,
I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah. You're like, they stubbed their toe on their coffee table. They're completely intact with no neurologic deficit, but you're worried they might have a subdural. Yeah. Could you just come up, check the patient? Like crazy things. I mean, that was pretty bad. What is this?
I don't know. That looks fake. Looks like fake news. Is that real? Is that bruising?
No, that's probably all the bruising. I'm trying to figure out if there's like scarring. Like, did she have like any sort of like surgical scars or anything? Anyway, I guess the fairest answer to your question, though, is that I have not personally seen it, but I can't say definitively that it's like not possible.
Like to somebody, again, not a doctor, looks like you'd have to drain that. But if it just goes down on its own, I mean, that's not bad.
I mean, pretty much most like blood will just eventually go away on its own, right? If blood ends up in a space that it's not supposed to be in, with the exception of basically, I mean, even the brain, right? If somebody bleeds into their brain, if it's not causing a bigger problem, then we just leave it and give it time. Now, the times you do, I mean, neurosurgeons do plenty of surgery for taking blood out of the brain, but it's usually after, it's like because you're confident that leaving it there is gonna, or leaving it there won't work. Okay. But by and large, like if you take, let's say, take a random night on call as a junior neurosurgery resident, you take 15 phone calls from the emergency room because they'll call you for every single CAT scan that has blood inside a patient's skull, basically, whether it's like nothing or like so much blood the patient's dying, doesn't matter. They'll call you. You take 15 scans of blood in someone's brain, there's a good chance like 13 of them you do nothing for. I mean, there's a high number of patients that get blood in their brain that you just leave and it goes away. And that's in the brain, which is a very sensitive environment.
Yeah.
You take, basically anything outside the brain and you can leave tons of blood there, and it'll eventually go away on its own.
Interesting. I would have never thought that.
Yep.
I guess this is a good time to ask what should someone be worried about, like in terms of like a brain injury? Like, what's a red flag? What's a red flag that, hey, you should probably go to the hospital?
Any confusion is probably one of the first things I'd look for.
That's me every day.
Yeah, definitely confusion. I think loss of consciousness kind of falls in that bucket. I mean, I don't think I think it's pretty obvious, right? You've got like extended, long-standing loss of consciousness. No one's going to be like, stick them in bed. They'll sleep it off, right? They're probably going to take them to the emergency room. It's usually when you've got like those very brief periods of loss of consciousness, but then everything else is fine. People wonder like, oh, should I go?
And you say confusion, like what level of confusion? I know I joked, probably a poor time for that, but like how confused? Like, if they can't remember their name, they can't remember.
Well, it depends what their baseline is. Baseline is very important.
Okay.
If it's a young, healthy person who's otherwise cognitively intact, and you say like, hey, tell me your name, and they can't tell you their name, or you're like, hey, what year is it? And they tell you it's like 1995, or like, where are you? And they're like, Disneyland. Like, those are red flags, right?
Okay.
If they can't answer one of those questions when they're typically like, of course, know the answers, that's a red flag. But then it gets more nuanced as a physician, because you do have to factor in patients' baselines. A lot of times you'll have elderly patients with some degree of dementia or cognitive decline where, you're asking them like, hey, where are you? And they're like, I'm at the nursing home. And you're like, who's the president? And they're like, Reagan.
Richard Nixon.
Yeah, Reagan's still the president. You're like, what the heck? And then you like look at the daughter, and the daughter's like, oh no, he's always like this. I mean, he's been having dementia for the last 15 years. You're like, all right, well, okay, my questions are clearly unreliable.
Got it.
And that's when you start to look more like general like alertness. Are they awake? Are they alert? You have to keep like slapping them in the face to get them to talk to you. There's a lot of tricks. And part of it is it takes experience and sort of knowing what to look for. And that's why if you're ever in doubt, it's like just go to the hospital. Because it doesn't take a lot of doctoral experience to get that like rough. Are there red flags or are there not red flags? Right. You don't need 15 years of experience to learn those things. I think of a resident that is seeing these types of injuries over and over and over and over and over again. By the end of a year, they'll have a really good handle of like, this is somebody who's sick with red flags. This is someone who's probably okay. Like, let's watch them versus like, this person can probably just go home. So yeah, but interestingly, because we never answered this question. I mean, you asked like, oh, what happened? What about people with like glass jaws?
Yeah, we've been all over.
This is one of the things I found very interesting. Apparently, the jaw actually is unlikely to have any real connection to loss of consciousness, like that knockout punch. Yeah. It has more to do with the just like the way someone takes a hit to the jaw.
It's usually when someone gets hit clean right about here, that's when you'll see them get knocked out.
Yeah. And it's because what it's doing is it's just like such a good lever to the skull that causes rotation, horizontal rotation so rapidly with such acceleration that it's able to induce the mechanisms of loss of consciousness very quickly.
Huh.
Whereas like if you just take like a frontal blow to the face, like to the nose or something, like you're not, because it doesn't induce those rotational forces. That's why it's believed, right? Because none of this is like concretely shown. Believed that, that lack of rotational force in the punch is what allows the injury to not be so severe. But then the other thing I thought was really interesting is that, so when you say like, oh, how come some people have like a glass jaw and other people have, an iron jaw, whatever they say, they think it's actually more because of neck muscles, right?
Yep. Right.
Your general tension of the neck muscles are resistant to those rotational forces, like when you take that punch.
Mm-hmm.
And for that reason, the injury is not as bad.
So
and
it's almost like if you have like stronger neck muscles, it's almost like a sponge absorbing that like torque.
Yeah, your stronger neck muscles are preventing that torque from happening. But also, I think that's why alertness of the incoming punch is a key component. If you don't see it coming, subconsciously you're
not tensing up, you're not fighting it.
Yeah, your neck is not preparing for that impact. Whereas if you don't see it coming, it doesn't matter how strong your neck muscles are or aren't. You're not going to be able to subconsciously respond, and that's why the thought is that you're able to knock somebody out. And that's why never seeing it coming is a very important part of achieving a knockout in combat sports.
Okay,
so that's the aspect of the jaw.
Okay.
Now, the thing that's really interesting, we're getting into like the actual biology of how someone gets knocked out. And obviously, nobody really truly knows. But there was this fascinating hypothesis in a paper. What did they? Hold on, I gotta get the name of it right. Let me find the. Oh, here we go. Let's see what they call it. Mechanoporation hypothesis.
That's a fun name.
It is. I thought this was really cool. Why don't we put the article up on a paper? Let's zoom in because I think the figure says it all.
Okay. What? I'm sure it's going to get to this. What is this a figure of?
Okay. So, if you think about a single neuron,
mm-hmm.
the outside, like lining, the wall of that neuron is made up of what we call like a phospholipid bilayer. There's a lot of words there. Right? Basically, what you have to imagine is these little sperm-looking things.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Right? This is a phospholipid.
Okay.
Right? These things on the outside, the little heads of the sperm,
mm-hmm.
they like water. Right? They interact very well with water. These little tails, the sperm tails, are what we call hydrophobic tails or cores. And they like imagine they're like made up of oil, right? Oil does not like water.
So they don't like water.
Yeah. So it's like imagine like an oil tail and like a water head.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happens is if you just like drop these things in, they sort of collect and they basically self-assemble. So that way you get a layer facing outward on each side. So that way the part that likes water basically migrates to face the water, and everything that hates water kind of huddles to the middle to protect itself from the water. And so this is basically like, imagine this is like a core of oil, like sticking together. And then this is like a shield of water. Does that kind of give a nice little picture as to like why this looks the way that it looks?
Yeah.
And this is basically what makes up the whole wall of the cell all the way around of the neuron.
Okay.
Now the thought is that when somebody gets punched, smack, the actual mechanical force, that instant impact, basically causes a temporary shearing or opening of the cell membranes in one of two ways. This is what they call the hydrophobic way or the hydrophilic way. The hydrophobic opening, like it's like imagine like you've got a cup of water and it's still all the water's just hanging out there, and you like slam a bunch of air into it, and you just disturb it and you get bubbles everywhere, right? Or even if you don't disturb it, right? Or even if you don't inject air into the water, you just like mix up water, right? You see a bunch of air bubbles come up in the water, right?
Yeah, if you stir it like really fast, it creates almost like a tornado hole, like a water.
Like my point is you can look at a glass of water and it's like clear. There's no air bubbles in it.
Right.
But if you just disturb it by shaking it,
air bubbles.
Like put it in a closed bottle, right? Take a closed water bottle and you just shake it, right? You'll get a bunch of air bubbles that start coming up in the water. Mm-hmm. That's like the idea here. You have this like assembled membrane, and then it gets shaken, and it basically like kind of like porates. It creates a hole in the membrane. In this case, it's like shearing open in a way where like these parts of the tails that hate water, that are just love oil and hate water, they are not protected. So like these sides of the tails, they're like touching water, and they freak out. They're like, we don't want to be touching water. And these holes close very quickly, like very quickly. However, if it opens in a way where it sort of self-assembles and creates this barrier to the water, these pores will stay open in the membrane of the cell much longer. And that's when they believe that basically the neuron, in taking a complex thing and making it very simple, that's what they believe leads to the neuron to shut down.
Which one? Either one?
This one. This one basically happens too fast. It like opens and closes.
Okay.
This one is like it opens and hangs out open long enough where like basically all the internal chemicals of the cell and everything go way out of balance, and the cell just shuts down. And so when these pores open, the thought is like basically you get punched, this neurons get jostled, it opens up, creates this pore, the neurons go crazy, they shut down, but then these pores close back up, they reassemble into this nice membrane. The cell sort of reestablishes all its proper chemical gradients, and then the lights come back on. And that is the mechanoporation hypothesis that is thought to explain why, or potentially explains how like a boxing knockout occurs in a way that like somebody loses consciousness and very quickly like regains consciousness.
Fascinating.
And I thought that was a lot of, I was very intrigued by reading into this. I thought it was a lot of fun. I don't know that we'll ever be able to prove it.
How do you study that? How do you study that in the live brain?
It's tough. I mean, obviously they're doing like, this is like all based on primarily animal models and things like that. But I think the real question is, what are the long-term consequences? If this is true, right? Do the mechanisms of mechanoporation link mechanistically to long-term consequences of head blows?
Well, hey, and let's even take it that middle one, right, where it's happening too fast. Are all those little ones causing a bunch of those to keep happening super fast until it eventually is worse?
No, well, so
at
the end of the day, it's all very interesting from like a scientist perspective. But honestly, at the very beginning, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head in that the macro behavior of the individual dictates the overall net impact over the course of a career, right? Obviously, yes, if you have one bad knockout and it causes a big problem, like an intracerebral hemorrhage that causes a patient to herniate and die, like a handful of is clearly happening with boxers. That's in a category of its own. But when you look at the effects of getting knocked out versus taking repeated head blows, you're never going to be able to parse that out in such a heterogeneous lifespan of an athlete, right? An athlete is never going to be, only ever knocked out or only ever take small repeated blows. So you're never going to be able to compare and contrast. But I would guarantee that if you could well characterize the macro behavior of an individual athlete, like you've described, some athletes were known for being able to take more punches than anyone else. By and large, if you look at the big picture, you must see trends in the impacts of that over the course of a career. And that a fighter who's more, their style's built around avoiding hits, their brain has got to be healthier at the end of that career than someone who's built around taking as many hits as possible.
That's what I would assume. Get hit less. It's got to be better in the long run. Blows to the head are not good. The less of them that you take is probably better for you, would be the way that I'd summarize it.
I mean, it definitely is. The question just becomes, I think in having spent the last hour working through all of this with no preconceived opinion about anything, I think the real questions we should be asking ourselves are, what are the ethics of these sports in society? We're asking children to begin training and developing their skills in these sports. And they're making decisions about committing their life, their long-term life, to these professional tracks of sports long before their brains are biologically developed in a way that is capable of making those decisions in an informed capacity. But then again, you could make that argument in many aspects of life, not just combat sports, right? You can make the argument that we ask children, essentially, all over the United States to commit to, some cases, hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt to go to college. And we're asking them to weigh the long-term benefit of going to college versus the potential harm of taking on all this debt. And we're asking them to make that nuanced evaluation and decision with a brain that is only 18 years developed, when really frontal lobe development and the part of the brain that allows you to project into the future and say, like, this is how I think things might go. These are the potential risks and benefits of this decision down the line. That type of cognitive processing is generally happening in the frontal lobes. And the frontal lobes, at least for males, it develops a little bit earlier in age for females, but for males, that type of frontal lobe development is not really coming into full maturity, I think is probably the best word, until somewhere between 22 to 24 years old.
Okay.
And so you're asking people to make decisions about the future consequences of their decisions now, when they are not at a mental development stage to fully grasp and make those decisions. But then what do? You tell people you're not capable of making adult decisions until you're 24 years old. And
right.
we just stick everybody in their parents' basement until their mid-20s and their frontal lobe finishes developing. And then we say, okay, now you're equipped to go out and start making decisions for yourself. I don't know what the answer is, but these are things to think about. It goes beyond just combat sports. I mean, I think that the factor of combat sports you bring in is now you're creating injury to the brain, and you're asking people with injuries to their brain to make smart, intelligent, forward-thinking decisions about their life.
And probably injuries to the brain in formative years, like of some kind. That is an interesting way to think about it. And who knows? Who knows what happens?
Who knows? We're not going to get to the bottom of it this week, but maybe next week. What are we talking about next week?
I don't know. But before we do that, final question: who's your favorite boxer or mixed martial artist?
Favorite boxer or mixed martial artist?
Or one of each, whatever you got to pick one.
See, I was never really big on either one, even though I trained and participated in mixed martial arts and even took a few fights, like amateur fights, and represented the Marine Corps. I was never like big into the professional scene. But I would say like probably some of the like real old school people that I did find like interesting and sort of made me think like, oh, I want to try that, and made me like go find a gym and train and stuff. Like I remember seeing some of the like Georges St. Pierre fights, thinking like, this guy's unbeatable. This is insane.
Maybe one of the pound for pound best fighters of all time.
That guy, I mean, what time frame was that guy fight?
That
was like UFC
58. That had to have been like early to mid 2000s.
Yeah. Georges St. Pierre. UFCs. I mean, he was, I think he must have been like UFC like 50s.
Yeah, it was early on. He was one of the, as UFC was becoming a more prominent like mainstay in the entertainment world, you know, mainstream media. I don't know what to put them in the category. And he was one of like the founding people, I would say, for that time period. He wasn't like a Gracie or a Ken Shamrock or a Tito Ortiz, but he was like that next generation.
Yeah. Okay, my question for you. What is your favorite fight, mixed martial arts, boxing, anything in that world?
Oh, man.
Your favorite movie?
Oh, favorite movie?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
There's so many.
Hold on. There's so many. What was it? Never Back Down. I think that's what it was called.
Never Back. Yeah.
Is that it? That was the one like the 2000s.
That was like one of the first movies ever made about mixed martial arts.
That one was so good.
Okay. This is my Never Back Down story.
Mm-hmm.
When I was at boot camp, so this was 2008. 2008. I was at boot camp. Our platoon had one of the highest, I think we like held the record for like highest rifle range scores or something like that. And once you start getting towards like the second half of boot camp, as your platoon performs well in things, they will give you incentives. One of the incentives was basically if you guys obtain the highest score on the rifle range, you will get to watch a movie. Okay, whatever. And it's like when you're at boot camp, you have no social contact whatsoever, right? Your life is dictated minute by minute. You're basically told when to chew, when to piss, when to shit. Like you have no control over anything. So the fact that somebody was going to let you literally sit there and watch a movie for an hour and a half was like the most mind-blowing concept in the world. So we end up getting the highest score on the rifle range. And we finally get to watch this movie. And all the drill instructors, now you have to you have to envision this, right? Bedtime at boot camp. Like once everybody's like hygiened up for the night, ready to like lights out, get in the rack.
Jammies on, teeth brushed.
No, well, that's exactly it. Jammies in boot camp. What do you like? Just imagine 75 guys in a squad bay. You know what they're all wearing? A green t-shirt, kind of similar to the one I'm wearing now, obviously, but there's no like nothing here. It's just a plain green t-shirt, tighty whities, and boot socks. That's it.
Nice.
So imagine 75 guys sitting there, like basically with their legs crossed in formation, like on the ground in tighty whities, just watching a movie, like basically like at attention while sitting. And that's the movie we watched.
It's a perfect movie for that.
Now, hold on. It gets better. Do you remember the scene where like his like girlfriend like takes his sweaty gloves out of the closet and then like tackles him and they're like laying on the floor and the
fact that I remembered the name of that movie is a huge win. I do not remember the movie at all. I just remember it was awesome.
It's like the one like semi-sweaty scene in the movie.
Okay.
It's really not much, right? It's like it's very benign, right? But now think a squad bay full of 75 guys that have not seen a woman in, I don't know, 3 months. It's one of those things where now this scene comes on, we're all sitting there in our tighty whities on the floor, and it's like not a sound. Silent. And there's this complete dweeb in our platoon. This guy, Kuhn, gets up in the middle of this scene and starts walking to the bathroom. 75 guys are like, "Where are you going, Kuhn?" And he just looks at us with this deer in the headlights look like, bro, way to be awkward, man. Way to be awkward. Anyway, that's my story for that movie. Anyway, I think this is a good note. Things have gotten way off topic.
Way
Let's
offhand.
go ahead and set our sights to next week. We're talking about what is neurosurgery? A very broad question. I think that people do wonder. We don't talk about it much, or maybe it's kind of a little bit of a black box. You know, you sort of like, oh, brain surgery. That's kind of cool. But like, you don't actually know what it is. Next week, we're going to talk about like really what neurosurgery is, like really what it is. You know, we're going to talk about all kinds of crazy stuff. So definitely tune in. We're going to have some awesome stories for next week. Before you tune out tonight and go to bed, head on over to our fundraiser. Help us hit our 15,000 by February 15th in order to support our programs for veterans, military, and other patients with brain and spine injuries. We would greatly appreciate any help from our community in reaching that goal. And that's all I got. Any parting words there, Josh?
I think the show's called Kingdom, the Great Mixed Martial Arts Show.
Kingdom.
I think it's called Kingdom. Let me look real quick. That's my parting thoughts of this.
All right, go watch Kingdom.
Go watch Kingdom. Great show. This is a fun topic. I appreciated this as always, and it was good to break it down. Appreciate everybody for joining. It's good to be back. It's good to be back on the stream. New year.
And we're going to be back next week, Wednesday, 7 p.m. every Wednesday, the same time, same place, different topics. We got all kinds of interesting stuff coming up this year. So we'll see you all next week. Don't forget to head on over to the donation page and submit your annual support for our veteran and military brain and spine injury service programs. Thank you so much. We'll catch you guys next week. Have a great night.